on Channel Africa. Available on the Channel Africa app. Tsepiso Makwetla winds it down on African World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m.
And it is exactly 9 p.m, 2100 hours Central African time. A very good evening to you. A warm welcome. This is Africa World Hour here on Channel Africa. Stay connected to Africa and the world with Channel Africa, the international voice of the South African Broadcasting Corporation, bringing you 60 minutes of the very latest news and current affairs in and around your world, wherever you're listening from, whether you're listening from the heart of Africa or from other parts of the globe. We bring you the news, the views, the faces, the perspectives that matter. Of course, we bring you interesting developments on stories that are probably on your radar or not. So whatever it is, do reach out to us, share your thoughts on your perspective on the stories that we're covering. I'm Tsepiso Makwetla. Welcome to it.
1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Gunmen have attacked a university community in Nigeria's Central Plateau state, killing at least 13 people. This is the latest violence in a region long plagued by deadly farmer-herder conflicts. Violence in central Nigeria, also known as Middle Belt, is often painted as ethno-religious between mainly Muslim Fulani herders and Christian farmers. The Plateau State government said the gunmen were unknown and imposed a 48-hour curfew in the district. The University of Jos has had to suspend examinations, which were due to start today. Malawi is facing rising economic losses from climate change, currently costing the country around 1.7% of its gross domestic product each year. Experts warn that losses could reach between 3 and 9% by 2030 and up to 16% by 2050. If the trends continue, these figures were highlighted also at the 5th African Regional Conference on Loss and Damage in Lilongwe, which concluded recently. George Mango, our correspondent, has more.
At the conference, discussions highlighted that Cyclone Freddy alone affected over 2 million Malawians in 2023, underscoring the economy's vulnerability. Experts and policymakers noted Malawi's substantial losses to climate change, now impacting infrastructure and communities.
The African Union chairperson Mahmoud Ali Yusuf says a continental body will always be keen to work with the United Nations in finding a permanent solution in Sudan. The AU boss made the remarks while hosting the personal envoy of the UN Secretary General for Sudan, Pekka Havisto, in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. As Kailihle Kumalo reports, Havisto brings to the position over 40 years' experience in politics and international affairs.
The AU boss Mahmoud Ali Yusuf says they'll continue to encourage sustained engagement with Sudan, emphasizing that any political process must be Sudanese-owned and inclusive. The two leaders have stressed the urgency of an immediate ceasefire as a pathway to a credible political process and the importance of aligning all mediation initiatives under AU leadership. Yusuf and Havisto have called on the parties in Khartoum to de-escalate and engage in constructive, inclusive dialogue that will pave the way for the return to constitutional order in the Northeast African country.
Russia has ordered a British diplomat to leave the country, saying he worked as a spy in Moscow. Britain has been a major critic of Russia after its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. In a statement, the Russian Foreign Ministry said the man had provided false information when applying to enter the country. The BBC's John Sudworth has more.
Russian media, quoting the Federal Security Service, the successor to the KGB, says that the British diplomat has been ordered to leave after counterintelligence officers revealed he was working as an undeclared intelligence presence, in other words, as a spy. The UK Foreign Office has called the allegation malicious and completely baseless. Moscow and London have expelled multiple embassy staff over the past decade, with both trading and denying allegations of espionage.
The Israeli military says it has carried out new waves of attacks across Tehran following earlier reports of widespread power cuts near the Iranian capital and in nearby cities. The BBC's James Waterhouse has those details.
Despite the continued heavy airstrikes by Israel and the US, Iran is still able to hit back at either Israel or the Gulf states with drone and missile attacks of its own. The Iranians hit a power station and water plant in Kuwait, killing a worker, according to officials there. Saudi Arabia says it intercepted 5 ballistic missiles. The Iranians have also threatened to target US universities across the Middle East.
The British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has signalled that he wants to stop social media companies using addictive functions that keep young people hooked, saying such features shouldn't be permitted. Britain is considering a social media ban for under-16s, joining countries like Indonesia and Australia. The BBC's Ben Wright reports.
While Sir Keir Starmer said he was open-minded about a ban, he said the next generation would not forgive the government if it did not act. Addictive features like infinite scrolling and autoplay could be in ministers' sites. Last week, Meta and Google were held liable in a landmark legal case in the US that found social media platforms were designed to be addictive to children, a decision Sir Keir described as a turning point. Both companies have said they will appeal.
1 hour, 1 continent, 1 voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It's 6 minutes past 9. South Africa is ramping up border security and traveller support measures ahead of the busy Easter holiday period. Commissioner Michael Masiapato of the Border Management Authority has told the media that a multi-departmental deployment plan aimed at protecting vulnerable travellers, improving infrastructure and ensuring smoother movement at ports of entry will be established. Channel Africa's reporter Michael Mbewe.
The Border Management Authority hosted a press conference on Sunday to unveil the operational plan for the Easter period and outlined the measures to be implemented to ensure an efficient and secure movement facilitation, including amended operational hours. Speaking at a media briefing in Pretoria, BMA Commissioner Michael Masiapato outlined collaborations with the Department of Social Development, Department of Tourism, and the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure to strengthen safety, combat trafficking, and enhance facilities during the high-traffic holiday season.
To tackle the cross-border social protection challenges, particularly the safeguarding of minors and vulnerable travelers, including those without requisite travel documents and victims of trafficking, we have partnered with the Department of Social Development to deploy various social workers to the various ports of entry through their provincial structures. In addition, we welcome the continued partnership with the Department of Tourism, wherein they deployed over 160 tourism safety officers to enhance the seamless flow of traveler movement within the port environment. With regard to infrastructure augmentation, even for this festive season, which is Easter, the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, they basically continue to provide, amongst others, temporary lighting across the various ports, additional ablution facilities, barricades, JoJo water tanks to enhance conditions within the port environment as well as the transit corridors.
Border operations are set to run more efficiently this Easter as Commissioner Masiapato confirmed extended hours at key ports of entry following agreements with neighboring countries. The move, approved by Home Affairs Minister Leon Schreiber, aims to streamline cross-border travel and improve coordination during the holiday rush.
Within this planning phase, at the regional level, we have also conducted extensive port-based interjurisdictional discussion with our 6 immediate neighboring countries. Here we talk about Lesotho, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Namibia, Eswatini, as well as Botswana. These discussions were focused mainly in maintaining streamlined border processes, but also enhancing coordination in terms of operational modalities. As a result, agreements were reached to adjust operating hours at some of the key ports of entry, particularly those that are not operating on a 24-hour basis. The Minister of Home Affairs, Dr. Leon Schreiber, as the chairperson of the Interministerial Consultative Committee on Border Management, had fairly approved the request that we presented before him for the extension.
That report there by Michael Mbewe. Now let's move on to the big story that we've been looking at here in South Africa. The Deputy Minister of the country's Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs Department, Prince Zolile Burns Ngamashe, has called for calm in the city of Ukompo in the country's Eastern Cape province after a march against the alleged coronation of the Igbo Nigerian king. It turned violent today. At least 12 vehicles are believed to have been set alight during the chaos. Ngamashe says the Igbo community has already extended their intention to visit the Kgagabe monarch King Sandile to apologize for what has happened.
The contingent of ministries, state security from the presidency, police, home affairs, DERCO together with ourselves. We will be meeting with the High Commissioner, who also has written a letter to the Premier of the province expressing the apology of the. Out of that meeting, we will then determine a date wherein we will all descend to the Palace of His Majesty together with those Nigerian nationals who have voluntarily already expressed their intention to apologize to the kingdom and its people.
And that was the Deputy Minister of South Africa's Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs Department, Prince Zolile Burns Ngamashe. We're joined now by the President General of the Nigerian Union, South Africa, and Human Rights Attorney Norbie Smart. A very good evening to you, and thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us. Mr. Smart, are you with us? I'm hoping we can raise him. I'm not sure if he can hear me. In conversation with the President General of Nigerian Union, South Africa, and Human Rights Attorney Norbie Smart to respond to what has been happening in Ukompo today. Are you with us, Mr. Smart? All right, he doesn't seem to be responding. Let's see if he... I believe you are muted, Mr. Smart. Can you hear me now? All right, let's see if we can get the ATM on the line. Unfortunately, we don't seem to be getting much response from Norbie Smart. It's been a very, very distressing thing to watch, just the level of violence. And there has been an appeal by various quarters for calm. And it's obviously become a very divisive issue as well, and it's not just what you would think that some are peddling that it's South Africans against Nigerians. You've even had some Nigerian voices who are saying what has happened is very problematic. So we understand that now. An apology is going to be sent to the king in the region. Mr. Norbie Smart, who is the President General of the Nigerian Union, South African Human Rights Attorney, is on the line with us, I believe, now. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly.
All right. So we understand that there's going to be a delegation from Nigeria that is going to send their apologies to Kgagabe. Can you confirm this? Who will form part of that delegation?
We have mandated the organization called that are part of the organizers of the ceremony that will form part of the delegation from the Nigerian Union as well as the embassy to lead the delegation. So we are busy having these discussions and this meeting with our diplomatic missions. They've started making contacts with the Premier of the Eastern Cape and the relevant authority, because now this has become a bit of a diplomatic issues that diplomatic heads ought to also be involved.
May I ask, at what point was it felt that an apology was needed? Is it as a result of the events, the protests that turned violent today? Or was it because there was outcry that this has caused offence?
I think from the initial point where the royal house made a statement through their spokesperson that they consider these an offense. You see, from the African perspective, if you are a guest in a person's home and the person says, irrespective of your explanation, I felt offended. At that point, it is when apology is needed. I have granted interviews where I openly apologize to the people of South Africa. And we're also using this medium to apologize to all the South African citizens who might have felt offended by this ceremony that was not properly explained, that was misconstrued. Be it as it may, we feel that we should apologize to the entire South Africans, not only to the people of the Eastern Cape. That is not the intention, and it is not what it is tended to be. And if anyone has felt undermined or threatened by this ceremony, that as a Nigerian union and as a Nigerian people, we say that we appreciate the cordial relationship, the cordial diplomatic relationship that we share between South Africa. South Africa and Nigeria are big brothers in the African continent. And if there's a need for clarification, we have come forward to own up to it. We have come to take responsibility to say this was not intended. Be it as it may, we at the Nigerian Union will issue a stern warning to all our affiliates that are part of the Nigerian Union organization to say, you cannot do as you please in another person's country. And so we are taking that. It's not about, we do not want to say because it's an unrest, we've spoken to the elites of the country, but we also owe explanation to the entire people of South Africa to say, no, there is no installation of a king, and there would not be. And that would never be the intention.
So the parties that were involved in the said coronation, do they understand where the anger arises from? Do they understand the reason behind the offence that was caused? And I ask this because, and it's not helpful to look at people who are spreading divisive statements, conversations on social media, but some which may be quasi-official have said, well, it was only a symbolic ceremony. Nigerians who are living in the Eastern Cape, who have been living there in the Eastern Cape, have every right to practice their culture, and by that showing their subjugation to somebody they see as a king, albeit still in the Eastern Cape.
Okay. I think the entire ceremony was misconstrued. But be it as it may, if despite our explanation, we've come out to, not in a defensive manner, but in a clarifying tone and approach. Hence, I've said, if I'm a guest in your house and you do not accept my explanation, and I see that your explanations is not adding up, then in order to find a peaceful resolution of the course of action, that I say, I don't want this. It is clear that the people of South Africa say, we do not want this. Even if the Constitution allows you to practice your religion, but not to an extent of crowning your own as a something that looks like a replicate. We understand the message, and the people that are involved understand the message. You see, there's another view to this. We have the African diaspora we have a lot of African people residing in South Africa peacefully, going around with their businesses and also practicing their religions as well as their traditional culture. So I think there should be a line or the drawing line between to what extent would they be able to practice this religion or their traditional belief outside the shores of their country. I think that is should be the debate moving forward to say. But if a person that could, the other party said, no, you've offended me by your action, has come out and denounced that, I think that should be the starting point of a healing process. And this group of people, as well as the alleged leader of Indibo in the Eastern Cape, has come out to say, no, I'm not a king, and I don't wish to be one. I do not have royal blood from Nigeria. I do not intend to take one in South Africa. This is simply that I belong to an organization who deems me fit to bestow to me a title, a leader of my people in the diaspora.
All right. So you say what happened was misconstrued.
Correct.
Was it misconstrued by the people who are present because the video shows and it is understood that it was a coronation, or was it? I'm just wanting to understand where the breakdown was, because this person is saying a title is being bestowed upon him as a leader of his country. And the questions really are being asked in light of South African law, also efforts to ensure that there is cultural cohesion. Because on the one hand, you say we need to establish whether these people who are of a certain whether religious practice or cultural heritage can practice their beliefs in South Africa. Is that what you believe is in question when you say that?
Yes, that's what I believe is in question here, because when those religions or traditional practices are being practiced openly, some people question, can you then practice your religion outside, and to what extent?
What would make them ask that? Because I don't think anybody who is living in South Africa has ever been stopped from practicing their religious practices. And also, we've seen these types of ceremony occur in other parts of the world. There was, and you know this quite well, the same thing that happened in Ghana, and the Ghanaians received it in the same way that South Africans did.
I beg to differ. What transpired in Ghana, it is totally different from what transpired here. The case of Ghana, the alleged Igwe in Ghana, if you understand or did some research about what transpired in Ghana.
I did, actually.
Yes, this man bought a huge land. He amassed some lands and claimed to import. He want to make that section of Ghana a colony of his. So it's totally different from this. People gathering in a hall. What happened in Ghana is totally different. I'm sure most people are viewing it from that perspective, which is totally different.
But I'll tell you why they view it in that perspective, because the explanation that was given is that an Igwe is being installed. So you are saying the misconception is around the ceremony. And I won't claim to be an expert or something that I'm not a part of or know of, but this is why I'm asking you these questions directly. The way it was handled, to my understanding, is seen as the same as what happened in Ghana. And it is the ceremony that we're talking about. And you're saying that was misconstrued. So what was the distinct difference in that ceremony in Ghana and the distinct difference here in South Africa?
It's totally different. It can be distinguished from each other. In Ghana, when there was a question asked, the alleged installers as well as the installed came out clearly to say, yes, this is what we were doing. But in this instant, immediately there was an outcry. The alleged installer of the organization came out with a disclaimer to say that is not what it is. Immediately, there was a disclaimer from the organizers to say it's not. And if that was not enough, the Ambassador Ajayi Temitope, the Nigerian active commissioner, came out and also denounced that with a press statement as well as an interview to say it is not the same. It might look like it in the video, but it is not.
So you do admit that it looked like it, and therefore, again, I go back to the incident in Ghana, which it looked like that people's interpretation would have really come from that. And did the clarification come because of the outcry?
If something was not what it is at the beginning, the question should be, if a person alleges that you claim to be an Igwe, then I think it presupposes that if there are factual bases for such, and that we installed, or this group installed an Igwe, and immediately the group says, no, here is the factual background, this is what required, we never did, and it was never intended to be. And to the extent that the Apex organization, the Nigerian Union, also came forward and said, this is what it is. This is an organization practicing social cultural activities. And to put it more clearly, this man has no land.
Okay.
He has no territory. And, you know, when I heard about a march to say we want to march towards the coronation of Igbo king. Now, the question is, where would you march to? Where is the house? Where is the kingdom? Where exactly are we going to march to the throne? Something that does not exist.
Right. Okay. Nobiswat, thank you so much for speaking to us. President General of the Nigerian Union of South Africa. Meanwhile, the leader of South Africa's African Transformation Movement political party, Vuyo Zungula, has expressed strong condemnation regarding the reported coronation of Nigerian national Solomon Ogbonna Eziko as the Igwe Ndigbo in the city of Gugombo in the Eastern Cape province. Zungula joins us now to talk about this. Mr. Zungula, very good evening to you. Thank you so much for speaking to us. And I believe we'll be chatting to him in just a moment. So it would be good to find out if the clarification that is being given, not only here today, but in other quarters, is satisfactory. Also for the people of Gugombo, do they accept the explanation that this was not a coronation and that this Solomon Ogbonna Eziko is not claiming the title nor the land that would go along with the title of that territory?
Africa is moving faster, smarter, further.
Africa.
The conversations are changing. The questions are deeper. The voices are stronger. So, we ask ourselves, what should Africa sound like now?
Not louder, sharper.
Not more noise, more meaning.
Something powerful is coming.
A new standard for the conversation.
A new rhythm for the continent.
I love it for us. Oh my goodness. Please join us as we celebrate.
The African perspective is evolving. Catch it all next month, Monday to Friday, from before sunrise until long after sunset, only on Channel Africa. 1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Continuing with our conversation on the events in Gugompo in the Eastern Cape province today, protests that turned violent, all in condemnation of the alleged coronation of a Nigerian national, Solomon Ogbonna Eziko. If what the President General of Nigerian Union of South Africa is to be believed, that there was no such thing. We're joined now by the ATM's President, Vuyo Zungula. Very good evening to you, Mr. Zungula. Thank you so much for speaking to us. I don't know if you had the opportunity to listen, but we understand from the Nigerian Union of South Africa that, in their words, this was a ceremony that was misconstrued to be a coronation, that the person who was being given whatever recognition of being a Nigerian leader in the community is not claiming a title, neither is he of blue blood, and he's not seeking to do so. Have you heard this explanation, and does it satisfy you?
We've read the statements both from the embassy and the Nigerian Union, and both institutions or organizations, they are blatantly disregarding South Africans for their genuine concern, because it is not South Africans who just woke up and said there was a coronation, which was not there. South Africans woke up, viewed videos that were there on the day of that particular coronation. The people that attended that particular event, in their own words, they are the ones who are saying they traveled from Cape Town to Johannesburg to witness an Igbo coronation of a king of East London. That is not our words. It's not the words of the kings of East London, which is Amakhachabe, or the community leaders. It is the words of the people who attended that event. Now, for the Nigerian Union and the embassy to just gaslight genuine concerns of South Africans instead of calling the culprits out and holding them accountable. In fact, we're not even surprised they are taking that posture, because each and every wrong thing that is done by Nigerians in South Africa, we've never heard, even for one time, that Nigerian Union or the embassy will actually hold its citizens accountable. So it comes as no surprise that now they are continuing with what they do best, which is to gaslight South Africans on what South Africans are genuinely concerned about in terms of the conduct of Nigerians in South Africa. And lastly, words matter. You can't come to a country and you are going to say you are a king of Nigerians in South Africa or Igbos in South Africa. Because even if there are South Africans in, let's say, Nigeria, even diplomatically, you can't use the word to say someone is going to be the president of South Africans in Nigeria. There's protocols, there's words that are used to characterize, the role that an ambassador can play in that regard, because of sensitivities when it comes to undermining other people's countries' sovereignty. So it is the case even in this situation.
So they are saying that there is going to be a delegation that goes to the seat of Hakabe to extend their apologies, that they themselves have called out the behavior, and they realize that their explanation does not suffice, and they believe in African culture, as they say, that they need to apologize, given that they have impugned the host country and the traditional seat of power. Is this the first step in the right direction in mending fences?
South Africans would be pleased if that apology would be a case whereby the Nigerian Union and the embassy would furnish a list of each and every individual that was in that coronation and who played a role in that coronation. And the ones that are illegal in the country be arrested, prosecuted, and deported as soon as possible. The ones who are legal in the country, they must be regarded as people that are undesirable. They must go back to their respective country, because for a country, for what happened today, whereby there was a huge protest to an extent whereby even other Nigerians went as far as stabbing other peaceful protesters. And then there was the fight back, which led to the destruction of property and the burning of vehicles. It's something that the ones that were there, the sources of this problem, must learn to take accountability. Because if there is no accountability taken by the deportation and declaring the other people undesirable, what stops the one Nigerians in Cape Town to do the same thing? Because they know most. The only thing they will do is to make a lame apology. The only apology that would be acceptable is for the embassy and the union to cooperate by bringing names of each and every person that was there for the purposes of them being deported. There is no other way about it. Those people must go to their respective countries and declare themselves kings in their respective countries, not here in South Africa.
So what Nusa is saying now is they're also going to seek clarity on whether those Nigerians that are in the country that remain here are entitled to practice their religious and cultural rights. And I did pose the question to seek better clarity on what that means, because it seemed to me as though people are being denied their human rights here in South Africa. That's what he's saying, and I was actually disputing that. But I'd like to hear your interpretation of what do you hear that to mean?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
The question was, they are, as a delegation, saying that they hope to get better clarity on whether Nigerians who are here can practice their religious and cultural rights. And I want to understand from you what you extrapolate from that, because it sounds to me as if Nusa is suggesting that Nigerians are being denied their religious and cultural rights here in South Africa.
No, that is not true. Nigerians are not denied anything in our country. In fact, it is Nigerians who are abusing, the welcoming of the welcoming nature of South Africans. It is Nigerians who are undermining on how South Africans are law-abiding and generally welcoming citizens. What needs to happen here is that, remember, this happened over 3 weeks ago, and it should not take only now simply because there was a protest, a peaceful demonstration by concerned South Africans, for them to say they are going to seek clarity on what their rights when it comes to religious and cultural expressions in South Africa. Secondly, if they are wanting to ascertain whether what they did was culturally acceptable, then it means they're not apologizing, because you can't on one side say you're apologizing, on the other side saying your cultural rights of expression are being denied. What we're seeing here, it is an invasion, and an invasion does not start by people taking over everything. It starts small, whereby they declare themselves king of East London. They start contesting elections. They start, like we have now, whereby South Africans, they've got no-go areas. You can't go to a place called California in East London because it is their place. They've made it their fortress. You can't go to Sunnyside. You can't go to Hillbrow. You can't go to Point in Durban. You can't go to Central in Port Elizabeth. Those are the areas that are known to be taken over by Nigerians, and those Nigerians, they ill-treat, abuse, and victimize anyone else who stays there. So it is not true that they've not been welcomed in our country. What we have here, it is them abusing the humanness of South African citizens who welcomed them.
Just going forward, and you are a man who understands the law, the issue is over jurisdiction, not only the claims that they're trying to create a parallel system, but I also want it to be a teachable moment so that South Africans understand. What does the Traditional and Queensland Leadership Act say, for instance, just on traditional leadership and the supremacy within the system, where, you know, on the one hand, there seems to be some sort of rationale that's been created that, well, these our elders in Nigeria, and they remain so, even if it be symbolically. Where is it problematic there?
I think if we can take it back, the root cause of the crisis that we're in now, it is a failure of government to manage migration. I'm saying this because we've got an illegal immigration crisis in our country, whereby people come from different countries. They settle in our country illegally so. And once you've got a criminal that has committed a crime by coming to South Africa, rest assured that criminal will commit further crimes, and because they are not about to respect the cultural, traditional, and other laws that govern our country, whereas a person came here illegally so. So that's a point of departure. The second thing is that the people who come to a country legally so understand the importance of respecting the culture, the religious views, and the way of life of the host country. You never see South Africans who go to other countries and want to impose. There are many South Africans, for example, who stay in Britain, in Ireland. When they get there, if bangamaxhosa, they will gather and have some cultural celebration and remind themselves of who they are. But it will never be done in a manner that, provokes the host country where they are working at that point in time. But for those who are illegal in the country, their intention, it is not the same as people who are law-abiding when they come to our country. And there's a clear laws when it comes to traditional leadership. We've got many South African traditional leaders who are still not recognized by the government. However, they try to follow the correct processes in terms of their recognition. And most importantly, you'll never see a traditional leader, Engumzulu, coming from the Zulu nation, wanting to impose himself as a traditional leader in the land of Amagachabe in East London, like in this case. Right. There's always that respect between these traditional leaders when it comes to a territory. But these ones, because they've got no respect for anything, that's why they went to the land of Amagachabe, which has an established king, and they decided to impose themselves.
All right, thank you so much. ATM President Vuyo Zungula reacting to what was happening in the Eastern Cape and what's expected to happen next and why it's problematic. It brings the time to 18 minutes to 10.
Let's just do it.
Your life just got easier. Get the Channel Africa app and take us wherever you go. Catch the latest news, enjoy your favorite shows, stream the music you love, and stay connected to the continent. All in one spot, right in your pocket. Simple, quick, and always with you. The Channel Africa app. Download it now on iOS and Android.
Parlez-vous couramment le français? Êtes-vous passionné par la radio? Et êtes-vous qualifié pour travailler en Afrique du Sud? Envoyez-nous votre CV et vos 3 minutes démo en MP3 à @channelafrica.co.za pour avoir une chance de rejoindre la famille Channel Africa. Si vous n'avez pas de réponse après 14 jours, cela signifie que vous n'avez pas été retenu. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
At the forefront, the most pressing issues on Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla.
Channel Africa. It's now 17 minutes to 10. The release of a new documentary known as The BB Files has caused a worldwide debate following its release on the Tucker Carlson network. It revisits long-standing allegations against Benjamin Netanyahu, from corruption and billionaire ties to controversial policies involving Gaza, including the funding of Hamas. Supporters call it investigative journalism. Critics say it's selective and politically loaded. Either way, it's raised urgent questions about power, narrative and accountability in one of the world's most scrutinized conflicts. Joining us now to speak about this, constitutional law expert and political analyst, Professor Richard Calland. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us, Richard. Firstly, let me start with, I asked you to chat to us about it because you were asking on social media, why is this not a bigger story?
Yes, Tsepiso, good evening to you. Thank you for having me on. I raised the question on Twitter because it struck me as extraordinary that a world leader at the center of such a conflict should have such an apparently absurd position hanging over him. And that position is that the very group that he accuses of being the main aggressor against Israel, namely Hamas, the people who perpetrated the horrors of October the 7th attack on Israel, he was funding, his government was funding, and for a long period of time, that $1 billion in cash paid through Qatar was being channeled to them in an attempt to divide and rule the Palestinian project. And that's now come out with very clear evidence from people in the know, and it seems that evidence is solid. Of course, it has to be tested in a court of law and all of that. But this rumor that's been circulating around now for several months, if not longer, has now been substantiated or corroborated by some witnesses speaking on that documentary.
And it's been said that these rumors, these allegations have been around for quite a while now, that they're actually widely known. How much bigger are Benjamin Netanyahu's actions just in terms of the bigger system where war, energy and power are tightly linked?
I think that's a very powerful question. It's so interesting that we're speaking on the day that the Israeli Knesset parliament has apparently passed a piece of law that will discriminate against Palestinian prisoners who have been convicted or face charges concerning very serious charges, and that they will face the death penalty, and that Israeli combatants or Israeli criminal offenders will not. Now, that's been immediately condemned by many human rights groups around the world. What it raises is a question about the quality and the integrity of the democratic system in Israel. It suggests that the country has really gone off the rails, and it's gone off the rails, if it has, because of one man, and that is Prime Minister Netanyahu. And it seems to me that those people who draw interesting historical parallels with historical figures like Otto von Bismarck, the German Iron Chancellor of the 19th century, do so because, like Bismarck, what Netanyahu has done very skillfully is make himself, in a sense, indispensable. He said, I'm the man that must protect Israel. I'm the man that must defend Israel. I'm the man that must lead Israel to a safer place. And that he therefore pushes aside the constitutional niceties and the rule of law in order to preserve his power in political office. And that's an extraordinary thing, that one person, a bit like Trump, can have such huge impact on the world, not just within his country, but now, of course, within the region, with Israel being a serious aggressor in the Iranian conflict that has emerged in recent weeks.
It leads one then to the question that if the global system rewards instability, oil markets, security alliances, currency dominance, is any leader actually incentivized to pursue peace?
Another powerful question. And of course, a real leader will always pursue peace. And somebody who is weak and somebody who has things to hide, who cannot lead through integrity, will find ways, or have to find ways if they want to survive in politics and in power, by distracting everybody. And in a sense, that is precisely what Jacob Zuma tried to do when he was perpetrating that thing known as state capture here in South Africa. It's what Trump is doing in relation to the Epstein files and the allegations of paedophilia raised against him and many others. And of course, also Netanyahu in his own country. And this is nothing new, that political leaders will sometimes use distraction tactics of the most egregious kind in order to preserve their own political skin, as it were.
So, Richard, these BB files point to his role in the war on Iraq, weapons of mass destruction, to his warnings for decades that Iran is years away from a nuclear bomb. But others are saying, was this a genuine miscalculation or a politically useful narrative to build on a real threat?
Well, I think the scenario or the theory that is put forward by some that Netanyahu has been waiting for that sort of sweet spot, that optimal moment where there is an American president willing to use American military power alongside or in cahoots with Israeli belligerents in the region in order to try and secure victories. The question, the real strategic question, is will any of that succeed? Will Israel be safer and more secure as a result of any of this bellicosity and violence and conflict, ranging from the Gaza genocide through to this proxy war that seems to be being fought by Israel in many ways on Israel's behalf? Will that make the state of Israel and Israelis and even Jewish people around the world any safer than before? And I think there has to be a really serious questioning of that proposition in light of what is happening and the really serious allegations that are made, not just against Netanyahu, but against Israel, which has always tried to present itself as the democracy of the Middle East. It's not behaving like a democracy at the moment, not by any means.
And it's interesting that you draw that distinction between Bibi Netanyahu and Israel, because those who are fingering him as the problem and kind of dragging Israel along. But more importantly is the intelligence assessments. During Iraq, that question was asked, and even now the question is being asked if real intelligence is being used and who is being listened to, because it's been painted that his policy on funding Hamas was a strategic containment to prevent unity with Fatah. Just your thoughts on this. Is there a dangerous gamble that's backfiring?
Well, I remember my own first visit to Palestine and to Israel in 1999, just before the turn of the century, when the Oslo Accord was in play, and there was talk of a real two-state solution. And Sharon, Prime Minister Sharon, was clearly against it, and he pulled off a stunt that created the second Intifada, which started when I happened to be in the country. And it was brutal to watch, and it led to a huge number of deaths, mainly on the Palestinian side, and a major setback to the two-state solution, from which I think there hasn't been a serious recovery. Netanyahu has prolonged that, and it's clear from his game plan and now the evidence of him funding and arranging for the funding of Hamas, that he wanted to divide and rule. He wanted Hamas in power in Gaza, and he wanted Fatah, the other main faction within the Palestinian liberation movement and government and politics, to be in control of the West Bank, and that way create a real division in Palestine, an already hugely divided place, much like apartheid South Africa, a comparison that, of course, Netanyahu and the Israeli government would balk at, but which many observers who have been to Israel and Palestine would say is a very apt comparison with the homeland states of apartheid South Africa, divided and split up by an authoritarian government that has no real intent to bring justice or human rights to those Palestinian citizens.
Benjamin Netanyahu had a corruption trial that was underway before October 7. So these files coming out now, as I mentioned in the beginning, there are those who are for it and those who are against it, saying that it's just a selective rubbishing of Netanyahu. But from your point of view, was he making national security decisions or just mere political survival?
Well, it may be quite hard to discern the difference between the two. And of course, part of the web of both political posturing and branding and misinformation is to cloud the issue and to, as I said right at the beginning of this interview, in my first answer to you, Tsepiso, that what an artful and malignant politician such as Netanyahu will try and do is mask their real intent and purpose and interest by presenting themselves as sort of a greater leader with a greater purpose, like Bismarck, as I suggested earlier. And that's precisely what Netanyahu has done and has continued to do in order to avoid justice, in order to muddy the water, and in order to develop a sort of popularity And it seems to be working, on the face of it at least, that Israelis seem to be largely behind his approach, that certainly in terms of the response to October 7th and the genocide in Gaza, the numbers suggest, the polling suggests that a large number of Israelis support it. So something very sinister, I would suggest, and warped has happened within Israeli society. And Netanyahu is at the center of that. And history later will judge him, no doubt, as to his role in leading Israel into this position that it now finds itself. And I would argue it's a predicament. It's not a position of strength and security and long-term sustainability. Far from it.
And speaking of on the face of it, Saudi Arabia's role, there are claims that it's benefiting without fighting. Are we seeing the region's power balance being reshaped in ways that the public isn't fully seeing?
Look, I'm not, Tsepiso, an expert in the politics of the Middle East or West Asia, as some people prefer to call it now. And those politics are complex. But I observe it with as much care and attention as I can. And even today, it's interesting to note the meeting involving Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Turkey, and Egypt, a sort of gang of four, so to speak, that have been held a meeting with their foreign ministers for a whole day, I think, yesterday. And what you're seeing there with that kind of maneuver is that the Arab countries of the region are trying to avoid a situation where they are pulled into a conflict which is extremely harmful to them. We've seen the response that Iran has made to the attacks from Israel and the United States. That response has caused a great deal of harm to the interests of Arab and Gulf states. And of course, on one analytical lens, through one analytical lens, Israel benefits from that because that divides the Arab world. It creates disharmony and discord. And I think what you're seeing now is a pushback against that. And leadership is going to have to be shown by Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey, and so on. These kinds of countries are going to have to find a common strategy to stabilize the region and to confront, frankly, Israeli and US power meddling in their affairs and causing a huge amount of instability, not to mention conflict and loss of life.
And said to be at the center of that power is a global oil system. Is it a driver, the dominance of the US dollar, the global oil system, an unspoken driver behind the repeated conflict in the region?
Well, that is often said to be the case, and yet my own analytical instinct to that is that is not the only driver. It's not as simple as that. It's hard, for example, at the moment to figure out exactly what President Trump and the US's game plan is, if that is the purpose here, because at the moment what one's seeing is of course, great instability in the global energy system and harm being done to US consumers ultimately, as well as many other consumers, despite what Trump said. He has unleashed through this war a huge global economic kind of tidal wave, or negative tidal wave, the ramifications and consequences of which are unpredictable and hard, if not impossible, to control. And so he's unleashed that. And putting the genie back in the bottle, I think, is going to be an extremely difficult task. You can see now the backpedaling, the attempt to try and secure the Strait of Hormuz in order to release the supply of oil to Asian countries in the main who desperately need it. That's one very foreseeable consequence. And I think, Tsepiso, you will have, I'm sure, along with many others, raised your eyebrows at the idea from Trump and others that this was unexpected. Anyone with, I think, half a brain cell would have predicted that kind of squeeze from Iran would have been one of the ways in an era of asymmetric warfare that they would have responded to their attacks upon their country and their sovereignty under international law.
The BB files, it lays out documented facts, but you know, the narrative goes further, particularly online. In today's media ecosystem, the influence it'll have on how people view not only what is happening with Iran, in Iran at the moment, but who Benjamin Netanyahu is, his legacy. Will it have a big dent, do you think? Will people focus on evidence and or interpretation?
Well, certainly one of the reasons I was very happy to agree to this interview is because I know that as an interviewer, you are always willing to try and ask difficult questions and get under the skin of an issue. Very few mainstream media organizations are willing to take that pursuit on. And of course, it's not necessarily easy for two reasons. One is the problem of resourcing in the media and so on, and weaknesses in newsrooms globally and so on. Secondly, of course, as you point to and allude to, in the ranks of social media, there is a vast amount of misinformation and fake news, which one has to wade through to try and figure out what is true and not true. And of course, as we all know, one of the old cliches of war is that truth is the first casualty of war. And so one has to be tremendously careful at a period like this of trying to discern what is accurate and truthful and what isn't. It would seem, if you compare what has been reported in so-called mainstream media, particularly from Western outlets, compared with some of the more reliable sources of information on Twitter and other forms of social media, that there are almost two different worlds here. There is one that plays according to an old playbook with kind of rather, I would say, out of date and staid kind of attitudes. For example, the reporting always in those outlets talks about the Iranian regime, but then refers to the Israeli government, for example. And I've already argued in this interview that the Israeli government now is handling power and perpetrating serious international and indeed national misdeeds and breaches of law that would, I think, easily cast it as a rogue state, and one that can no longer be described easily as a democracy.
Richard?
Certainly one that's human rights.
It's a pity we've run out of time. It was good to chat to you. Thank you very much for your time and insights. Constitutional law expert and political analyst, Professor Richard Calland, speaking to us about the BB files. That's it from Africa World Hour. African Diaries is up next.
1 hour, one continent, one